Quality, comfort, and grip at an affordable price. Whether it's our standard, pro, or elite socks, there's an option for everyone. Try a pair for yourself now at puregripsocks.com.
Here are 3 signs that you need new football boots. The first sign being a very common scenario if you're still growing, and that is your boots getting too small. But there is some clarification that needs to be made here, because I do think parents and even kids do get this wrong sometimes, where obviously if you're buying a pair of football boots for somebody that is still growing, you want them to last for as long as possible. Therefore, you buy them with a little bit of extra room at the end. Where it's a very common scenario that towards the end of the season or perhaps the next year, your feet have grown and filled in that extra space. Therefore, it's time to buy new boots, right? That would be correct only if your boots are so small that they're now uncomfortable. If you've simply grown to fill in that extra space and now there just isn't any, now you've achieved a type of fit that you would want ideally in a scenario where you are no longer growing. Football boots at the end of the day are made to fit as snug as possible while still being comfortable. So as long as your boots are still comfortable on your feet, regardless of whether or not you have extra room, that's what you need to determine, and that's going to be your major sign on whether or not to get a new pair. This is also your sign to remember to subscribe to the SR4U channel so you don't miss out on unsponsored, brutally honest reviews of all the latest football boots of 2025. The second sign it's time for a new pair of football boots is if your once super comfortable boots all of a sudden start causing you discomfort. Consistent discomfort. And the reason why I say that is because there are so many variables to football boots where even the most comfortable ones could give you blisters if the conditions were just right. For example, if it's a super hot day and the pitch is extra dry and there's just all these different variables that you're not normally exposed to, that's typically a recipe to experience something you don't normally experience as it relates to discomfort. In other words, if you end up with a blister kind of out of nowhere, that's not necessarily a sign that you need new boots. But if your once comfortable football boots all of a sudden start giving you a blister in the same spot consistently, or rubbing, or stud pressure, or some kind of discomfort that happens every single time you play for a couple sessions straight, that's probably a sign that something in those football boots is breaking down and it's time to look for a replacement. As much as it would be great for a pair of football boots that you really like to last forever, the reality is football boots are thinner and lighter and arguably more cheaply made than they've ever been before, and unfortunately, things just break down over time. So if you're finding that all of a sudden you're experiencing consistent discomfort in a particular area, definitely look into it. It's possible that maybe a new pair of insoles or a new pair of socks could potentially resolve that situation. But if you've gone through all the variables and you're still experiencing discomfort, it's probably just time for a new pair. And then the third sign it's time for a new pair of football boots is actually related to performance, but not in the way that you'd think. We've all been in that situation where you get a new pair of football boots, they're the latest and greatest thing at the time, you absolutely fall in love with them, but after 3 months, 6 months, a year, sometimes even just a couple weeks, something new comes out and you now have it in your head that newer equals better. Where if that's the way your brain works and you think getting that new pair is going to give you a boost of confidence or perhaps increased motivation that might actually make you perform better, I suppose if your bank account will allow for it, go ahead and get that new pair. But in terms of the reality of old football boots versus new football boots, there's really nothing about the latest ones that are going to perform better than the older ones, other than the marketing suggesting that that's the case. When I'm talking about performance-related issues with your football boots, that might be a sign that you need a new pair, is when you are consistently having the exact same problem. For example, FG boots tend to have plastic studs, and those plastic studs over time, depending on field conditions, or if you're somebody that likes to walk to the pitch with your boots on a concrete sidewalk, those studs are going to wear down in length, and as they get a little bit too short, depending again on the playing surface, you might experience more slippage than you did when the boots were newer. Another example would be as time goes on, your boots are typically going to continue to stretch even if it's only a little bit at a time, and it's entirely possible that after enough time and with enough wear, your boots can expand in such a way where now stability might be an issue, slippage on the inside might be an issue, rolling your ankle becomes a problem all of a sudden. These are all things that can be related to a pair of football boots simply just wearing out over time. But if it's causing you issues as it relates to performance, or perhaps putting you at a higher risk of injury, I'd say that's a pretty good reason to invest in a new pair. Where of course we have to keep in mind that there's a huge personal preference aspect to football boots, where some people really enjoy the feel of a well-worn in pair, where others prefer the feel of a new pair. It's kind of a judgment that you have to make for yourself. But if you are finding that your performance is suffering, and it's typically something that you can relate back to the football boots on your feet, it might not be a bad idea to look for something else. Where I'm not saying that your first instinct should be to blame your football boots, but if they look like they've seen better days, it's potentially a contributing factor.